we're group 10, and we chose to do our project on a library system.
Okay, so our proposed application is a library system, and the idea behind this library system is to have 4 users interact with it, where these 4 users will have a similar permission, and the administrator will have the additional feature or permission to add and remove books. We will be implementing this project using JavaScript, CSS, PHP, MySQL. We decided to use JavaScript to update the page without having to re-render the whole page. We decided to use PHP and CSS together to make calls to MySQL. And we will be using Bootstrap so we don't have to write from scratch a CSS program or code.
All right, and here's our ER diagram. We're going to start here on the right, where we have our user. We've decided to break down user into the 4 steps, as we mentioned before. So we have the admin, the student, the faculty, and the non-student. The admin is pretty much going to be the librarian. It's the person who's operating the system at any given time. And they're not going to be able to check out books. They're there merely to add or remove books from the system itself. So below that, we have our 3 users that are actually going to be using the system. So the student is going to be able to check out a book, which is student transaction, and reserve a book. They're only going to be able to have 1 reservation and 1 transaction at a time, but a transaction is going to be able to have 2 books at one point. You can see here it's a 1-to-2 relationship. The transaction will have an ID as well as the reservation, and the transaction will also have a due date, which is when the book will be due. Down here we have a faculty, which is very similar to the student transaction, except that their due date will be longer and that they're able to check out any number of books. And finally, we have the non-student, who's not connected, who's not a student, and they will have a non-student transaction which only allows them to check out narrative books, which is sort of like any sort of like kids book or fiction book, and they'll be able to check it out for a much shorter amount of time. So then we move on to our book. The book can be divided up into a textbook, a journal, or a narrative book. Each of these has their own attributes, but no other special constrictions on that. Additionally, a book has 1 publisher, and it has multiple authors, or it can have multiple authors. Both the publisher and the author are connected to the book, so that a book is required to have them in our system, since there's no point in keeping track of an author that there's no book of. A book can also be a series, which means that there's multiple of them, like in succession, so it continues the same story. So book 1, book 2, book 3. We decided to have a series be its own entity so that when we search for a series, we can put all the books that are in there, rather than searching through the book for the same entity.
Requirements. On a browser, the user will be first asked to log in, which will determine which type of account they have. Alternatively, they will be given the option to create an account. When they create an account, they will choose their role. For student access, they will be required to input their student ID. For faculty access, they will need their employee ID. For non-student access, they will need their email address. And finally, for administrative access, they will need a unique passcode. Once they have access to the system, their actions will be based on their roles. Look at every book in the library and determine the location. Additionally, they will be able to search for a specific book by using the title, author, or ISBN. Students are able to check out a max of 2 books and have 1 book on reservation in the case that it is already checked out. They will be issued a receipt with a transaction ID and a due date. A faculty member can check out any number of books and are able to keep them for a longer period of time than that of a student. Student user will only be able to check out literature books and will only be able to keep them for half of that of a student. Administrators can't check out books, however, they can view all of the transactions, searching through them either by book, user, or transaction ID. Finally, they can add or remove books from the library system. A book can be a journal, a textbook, or a narrative book. each of which has their own descriptors. And additionally, every book has at least one author and one publisher. On top of that, each book can be part of a series.
And that concludes the end of our presentation. We hope you'd enjoy it.